All right, guys, this is lesson 5.3. This is the second part of it, and there's only a couple slides left to do, but they take a bit of time to do them, so we'll go through one of these and we'll see a second one, which is just like the first. So if you catch on the first time, you've got it, but there'll be a second one. Just in case you don't, you can watch the second one too. All right, so we've got our ideas here. We've got the cosine addition formulas, and that's their question here. They want the cosine of s plus t, and then later they want the cosine of s minus t, but we'll just start with the cosine of s plus t. And that's that formula, you have to have that memorized. Cosine of s plus t. Remember, it goes cosine, cosine. And then since there's a plus in your formula, it goes minus, sine, sine. Okay, the thing you've seen from the previous problems that we've done is to do these problems, you need to know four things. You need the cosine of s, the cosine of t, the sine of s, the sine of t. So there's four different things we have to plug in. So we look up at this question, and we realize they've given us one thing, two things. So there's four things we need, but they've only given us two things. So before we can even begin this problem, we have to figure out two more things. We've got the cosine of s, but we don't have the sine of s. So we've got that. We need the sine of s. We've got the sine of t, but we don't have the cosine of t. So we're missing two things. So we've got two things, and we're missing two things. So before we can do the problem, we need the other two things. So let's start here with the cosine of s. The cosine of s is 3/5. I wish I knew the sine of s. Well, guys, this was the previous section, chapter 5, section 1, or section 2, where we could figure that out. If they gave me the cosine of s, how do I find the sine of s? I go cosine squared plus sine squared. And again, this is the angle s we're talking about. And I know that always equals 1. I'll take out the cosine of s, I'll put in 3/5. I'll remember to square it. And I've got the sine squared of s equals 1. 3/5 squared is 9/25 plus the sine squared of s equals 1. And then I'll subtract the 9/25, and I've got the sine squared of s. I go 1 minus 9/25, and remember 1 is like 25/25. So 25 minus 9 is 16/25. And finally, I'll take the square root, and I get the sine of s is 4/5. And again, when I do that square root, I'm thinking, is it plus or minus? But look, everything's in quadrant 1, so it's the positive one. We can not worry about the negative one on this one. So the sine of s is positive 4/5. All right, good. That's one more piece of information. Unfortunately, we needed two pieces of information. That's the cosine of s leads to the sine of s. And let's try again. How about the sine of t equals 5/13? Will that lead us to the cosine of t? And it will. All right, so we use the same formula. We've got sine squared. This time it's the angle t plus the cosine squared. T equals 1. The sine is 5/13. Don't forget to square that. Plus the cosine squared equals 1. When I square that, I get 25 over 169 plus the cosine squared equals 1. I'll subtract the 25 over 169. And again, this time 1, it's like 169 over 169. 169 minus 25 gives me 144. Over 169, I'll take the square root, and I'll come up with the cosine of t. The square root of 144 is 12, and 169 is 13. And again, the plus or minus, we just said we're in quadrant 1, so these are all positive. So now I've got two more pieces of information. I figured out the sine of s is 4/5. I figured out the cosine of t is 12/13. I come back up to the original question. I wish I would have left myself a little more space up here. But I've got all the information I need now. So I come up here, cosine of s, let's see. Cosine of s is 3/5. So let's see if we can squeeze it in right here. The cosine of s, yeah, it's going to be a little messy. Let's see here. Take that out. So the cosine of s is 3/5. The cosine of t, I just figured that out. Look, it's down there. It's 12/13 minus the sine of s. I just figured that out. That's 4/5. And the sine of t. Wait, what's the sine of t? Oh, they gave that to me. The sine of t, look, it's up there. It's 5/13. So it's 5/13. So I have all 4 pieces of information to sub into my formula. So I've got that, and I'm just going to erase this little bit here now. Hopefully you've got it copied down. So get this out of our way just so we have a little bit of room here to show our work. And now how do you multiply fractions? You multiply the tops. So I get 3 times 12 is 36. The bottom is 65. Minus 4 times 5 is 20. The bottom is 65. So I can subtract that, and I get 16/65. And so the cosine of s plus t, what does it equal? 16/65. Got it. Okay, you might be thinking, oh, wait, isn't there a second part to the problem? There is. That was the cosine of s plus t. Got that part done. Now they want the cosine of s minus t. We have to do a second part to the problem. Don't worry. This part is not bad at all. I'm just going to leave a little space right here so we can get that. You've done 95% of the work to get that answer. So the second part, it's not quite free, but it's nearly free. So if I want the cosine of s minus t, I go cosine of s minus t. The formula goes cosine, cosine. Now it goes plus sine, sine. And I look at the previous formula right here. It's like I just did all that. I've got the same numbers. So I'll sub in. And I've got the 3/5. And I've got the 12/13. And now instead of a minus, I have a plus. So I've got the 4/5 and the 5/13. The multiplication wouldn't change. It's 36 over 65. And it's 20 over 65. The only difference is now I add these, and I get 56 over 65. And that would be my answer for the cosine of s minus t. So the second part of the problem is kind of nice and straightforward. All right. That's kind of the last concept in this section. There's a second example you can watch. If it made sense, you are good. You can go on and do the homework. If not, I'll show you the second example. All right. Here it is one more time. They give you the cosine of s, the cosine of t. It's the same questions. Find the cosine of s minus t, and find the cosine of, I think plus was the first one, and then find the cosine of s minus t. So let's just write out those formulas. Cosine of s plus t is the cosine, minus the sine, oh look, I need 4 things. Oh look, they just gave me 2 things. Or the same thing here. This goes cosine, and this one now goes plus sine. If it makes you feel a little better, let's sub in the things we know already. The cosine of s is negative 1/5. Cosine of t is negative 3/5. I feel a little better. We're down here. Cosine of s is negative 1/5. Cosine of t is negative 3/5. And again, you can see we got this gap over here where we're missing 2 things. I need the sine of s and the sine of t. So let's put this on hold. We'll come down here and figure those 2 things out. So we've got the cosine of s is negative 1/5. Let's give ourselves a little space here. So we'll come back up to that question in a minute. But the cosine of s is negative 1/5. Oh, by the way, we're in quadrant 2. And given the cosine of s, how do I find the sine of s? Well, I go cosine squared plus sine squared equals 1. I'll put in the negative 1/5. I'll remember to square it. This one comes out to be a little bit messier. Because I square this, I get 1/25 plus sine squared equals 1. I subtract 1/25, so I've got sine squared. 1 minus a 25th is 24/25. I'll take the square root, and I've got the sine of s is the square root of 24, which I'll simplify, all over 25, and the square root of 24 simplifies to 2 root 6, because it's 4 times 6. Oops. And the square root of 25 was not 25, was it? That was over 5. So 2 root 6 all over 5. Okay, is it plus or minus? Second quadrant, A smart. The sign is positive in the second quadrant. So I've got 2 root 6 over 5 equals the sine of s. All right, not bad. Let's get our other piece of information. That was the cosine of s. I use that to get the sine of s. What else do we have up here? We had the cosine of t is negative 3/5. So cosine of t was negative 3/5. Let's give ourselves a little room here. So 2, the cosine of t was negative 3/5. Our method is the same. We're going to sub into the exact same, look, it's right here, the exact same identity. So let's just not write that identity again. Let's go right to the substitution. I'll get negative 3/5 squared. I'll get the sine squared. This time we're doing the angle t, aren't we? So sine squared of t equals 1. I'll square that out. Any negative squared is a positive. I get 9/25 plus the sine squared equals 1. I'll subtract the 9/25. I get the sine squared. 1 minus 9/25. Let's see, 1 is 25 over 25. 25 minus 9 is 16. Well, this one will come out nicely. I take the square root, and the sine of t is 4/5. And again, we're in the second quadrant, so we know that's positive. All right, guys, we've got our facts. Let's come up and sub them in. Sine of s is 2 root 6 over 5. I have these incomplete formulas up here. Sine of s is 2 root 6 over 5. 2 root 6 over 5. I'll sub that in. 2 root 6 over 5. And the sine of t, how much was the sine of t? 4/5. So I sub in the sine of t, 4/5. Okay, then we can figure these out. Up here I got negative 1 times negative 3 is 3 over 25 minus, on the top I've got 8 root 6 over 25. So my final answer is 3 minus 8 root 6 all over 25. There's not a whole lot more you can do with that answer. And then you can look down at the second one and realize it's the same thing, except instead of a minus, you've got a plus. And it's about as messy a problem as you could make with these. We've got 3 plus 8 root 6 all over 25. And so that is about as tricky or messy as you can make these cosine addition formulas. If you can understand this type of problem, there's really nothing in this section you won't be able to do. So that completes this section.